Today is day 1 of week 3 of the Every Bit Counts Challenge, and you guys know what I'm working on today. Green beans, and they are so time consuming. They're very easy, but they're very time consuming. So what I do is I rinse them really well. I do them one at a time, actually, under the water here in cold water. I break off the ends, which is hard to do with one hand, but I'll give you the idea. Break off the ends, which leaves me with the beans. Then I put the beans in my pot here. I add cold water, and then I blanch them for 3 minutes. I bring them to a boil for 3 minutes. Then they come over here where they're rinsed in cold water, and then after they dry out a bit, I put them into my freezer bags. And so far I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 quarts. So it's a good day for green beans. And I'm almost done, actually. This is all I have left for today, but there's more out there in the garden that I have to get. But this is what I'm working on preserving today. Today is day 2 of week 3 of the Every Bit Counts Challenge. It's my happy birthday to me, and it's awful. It is awful. It's awful, folks. It's also D-Day. D-Day for the tomatoes. Look at this. I have got a ton, and cucumbers and peppers. So I'm going to start off with the simple tomato base today, and then I'm going to turn it into all kinds of things for the rest of the week. So I did my tomatoes the way I always do. I washed them, I cored them, I seeded them, and I boiled them, and I took the skins off. So what I have left is pulp. So I'm crushing the pulp down and the juice. I'm going to bring this to a boil, and then I'm going to reduce it to a simmer, and I'm going to let it simmer for about 25 minutes. So next I have 1 6-ounce jar of tomato paste, and I'm going to add 1 cup of distilled white vinegar. Mix those together and add them to my tomato mixture. So I'm going to add the tomato paste and the vinegar and stir it up really well, and I'm going to let that boil for about 5 minutes. Now that this is boiling, I'm going to add 1.5 cups of sugar. And I'm using the Mrs. Wages mix again, the ketchup. I'm going to add that. And I'll probably end up with a jar of ketchup, but the rest I'm going to use as a base for barbecue sauce. So now that I have added all this, I'm just going to boil it and then let it simmer for 5 minutes, and it'll be done. So what I've been doing this week, since I have so many of these, is I've been cutting them on the bottom in an X. I core them. I put them in hot boiling water, blanch them for about 3 minutes, put them in ice water, and then peel the skins off. And I've showed you how I've done that before. So what I'm doing is I'm making a base for all of the other things I want to make this week. So the first thing I made was barbecue sauce, and I wanted to talk to you guys about the Mrs. Wages mixes. So you can find these everywhere for bread and butter pickles, dill pickles, pizza sauce, spaghetti sauce, just everything. And they're only about $2 a bag. And the reason I enjoy these is a lot of the recipes will say you have to have garlic, you have to have turmeric, you have to have mustard seeds, you have to have all of these ingredients just to make one thing, and it ends up being very costly, where with the Mrs. Wages mixes, the spices are all there. So all you need are tomatoes, usually, and vinegar. that's the pro side of it. The con side of it is, other than the bread and butter pickles, I've really not found any mix that works the way it's supposed to or tastes the way it's supposed to. So, but I still use them because I do like the spices and I do like the taste. But you usually have to add to it. So when I started making my ketchup yesterday, it didn't thicken the way ketchup should thicken. So I had to end up adding 2/3 cup of clear gel. Now, if you're not familiar with clear gel, it's an industrial product that they use to thicken things like jellies, jams, pie filling in the marketplace. Just a minute and I'll show you what it looks like. So you can get clear gel on Amazon. It's about $8 to $10, I believe, for a big, this is a fairly big container. You can also get it at different places like Sam's Club and your big box stores. But it's used as a thickener instead of cornstarch. So I made my ketchup as according to Mrs. Wage's directions. And then when it didn't thicken, I added 2/3 cup of this, put it into blender, and I ended up with perfect ketchup. But what I want to do on the next day is I want to take some of that ketchup and make it into barbecue sauce. So that's where we're going to pick up today. So this is how my ketchup turned out with the Mrs. Wages and adding some clear gel. It's thick, it's delicious, and that's the consistency I like, kind of like Heinz, nice and thick. So I've taken 8 cups of this ketchup that I made, and we're going to make barbecue sauce out of it. So I've got it simmering right now. And to my 8 cups of ketchup, I'm going to add 6 cups of brown sugar, 2 cups of apple cider vinegar, 3 cups of dark molasses, molasses are so pretty, and 1 cup of water. And I'm going to simmer that for a little bit, and then I'm going to add some more spices. Look at the beautiful color. It's got a great consistency. Now, if you want it a little thicker, if you like your barbecue sauce thicker, you can add some clear gel to it until it gets to the thickness that you would like. You would just take, about 2/3 cup of clear gel, and you would mix it with maybe a cup of your sauce here until it's mixed up really well, and then you would add it back into your barbecue sauce. But I like my sauce like this. So now that it's been simmering, I'm going to add my spices. I'm going to add 5 tablespoons of ground mustard, 3 teaspoons of onion powder, 1/3 cup of Worcestershire. Did I say that right? Worcestershire. You guys know what I mean. 8 tablespoons of smoked paprika, 4 teaspoons of garlic powder, and 2 tablespoons of chili powder. That's where it's going to get its bite. 5 tablespoons of salt and 2 tablespoons of pepper. Now I'm going to mix those in, and I'm going to let this simmer about another 10 minutes and see if it has the taste and the consistency that I like. If it does, we'll start canning. And now that I have my barbecue sauce in the water bath canner, I'm gonna can it for 20 minutes. Hi everybody, so today is day 4 of week 3 of the Every Bit Counts Challenge. I wanted to give you guys an update on the barbecue sauce. It's delicious. Now, if you like a sweet, mild barbecue sauce, follow the recipe exactly as I gave it. If you like a barbecue sauce that's spicier and thicker, I'm going to leave that recipe in the description. So my husband, I like the sweeter, milder. My husband likes the spicier, thicker. So I split the base. I canned the sweeter, milder for me, and I spiced his up a little bit. So let me tell you how I did that. To make it thicker, you can see that it's the consistency of what you buy at the store. I added 2/3 cup of clear gel. So you take your clear gel, put it in a cup, take about a cup of your liquid out, mix it up really good. And actually when you use clear gel, put it in the blender if you want to get it mixed up completely. And then you add it back to your liquid and it'll thicken up. So that's how I got that real nice thickness to this. To get rid of the sweetness, or to cut the sweetness, I added more Worcestershire sauce. So I ended up adding about a cup more of that and a half a cup more of the apple cider vinegar. So if ever you're working with something, ketchup or anything else that's too sweet, you can always cut the sweetness with more vinegar. So now we're both happy. I have the sweeter, he has the spicier. I have the thinner, he has the thicker. But use that base and just add to it or take away. Also, you can also cut sweetness by omitting the salt if you need to do that. So today I'm still working with tomatoes, and that's what I'm doing. I just create the base, and then every day I make something else out of it. So today I think what we're going to do is make pizza sauce. I've peeled, cored, and quartered my tomatoes and de-seeded them and drained them. And I have about 10 cups of tomatoes. And now I'm going to put them in my blender here and puree them. And then we'll put them in a non-reactive pot. To my tomato sauce, I'm going to add the Mrs. Wages pizza sauce mix. And just like the other Mrs. Wages mixes, I'm going to tweak it towards our tastes and what we like. But I'm going to use that as a base, and I'm going to add 5 tablespoons of sugar. And I'm going to let that cook, bring it to a boil, reduce the heat, and then let it simmer for 25 minutes. This has turned out beautiful. I want you to see. But I did have to spice it up a bit. So I added 1 6-ounce can of tomato paste, 1 tablespoon of basil leaves, a smidgen of salt, 1 tablespoon of oregano leaves, 1 tablespoon of Italian seasoning, my tomato powder that I dehydrated, I put in about 2 tablespoons of that, and about 2 tablespoons of the dehydrated tomatoes that I did. And it tastes fabulous. So I'm letting it simmer. It's got 10 more minutes. Then I'm going to put it in the jars. It's going to water bath over here for about 20 minutes. And I'm going to leave a 1/2 inch head space on all of my jars. Hi everybody, thank you so much for joining me here today at Re-Ritten Vintage Homestead for day 5, August 19th of week 3 of Every Bit Counts Challenge. And I wanted to show you that my pizza sauce turned out fabulous, and I'm really excited about that. It tastes great. So I'm still working on my base of tomatoes, and today we're going to make tomato soup. So I have about 14 cups of peeled, diced, and de-seeded tomatoes. I'm going to put those in my blender here, and I'm not going to blend them to a liquid. I'm just going to try to get a nice pulp going, and then we'll add the remaining ingredients. 2 medium diced onions. 4 tablespoons of olive oil. And 4 tablespoons of basil. And if you have fresh basil, that's even better. Now I'm just going to let that cook until my onions get nice and tender. You guys, if you're like my family who's from Kansas, they put a G in that onions. So I hope I didn't throw you off. So I'm going to let this cook until my onions get nice and tender, and then we'll add in the remaining ingredients. So now that my onions are nice and soft, I'm going to add 6 ounces of tomato paste and 1/2 cup of flour, and then I'll show you what that looks like as soon as I get those added. Now that I've added my flour and my tomato paste, you can see I have a really nice base here, soup base. I think you call that a roux, that I'm going to add some chicken broth to. So I'm going to add 7 cups of chicken broth. And I'm going to stir that up and let that simmer for about 10 minutes. The flour, the tomato sauce, the spices, the butter, the onion, the olive oil, after it all gets mixed together, it's this beautiful soup base, and the kitchen smells fabulous. So now I'm going to add my tomatoes, and after I put them in the blender, I ended up with 8 cups of this beautiful red tomato puree. I'm going to add that back into my soup base here, bring it to a boil, and then let it simmer for 30 minutes. And look at this beautiful soup. It has chunks of onion and chunks of tomato in there, which is why I didn't puree it to a liquid. And now's a good time while it's simmering to add my spices. So I'm going to add 5 teaspoons of salt and a tablespoon of pepper and 1 tablespoon of honey at a time until it gets to the desired sweetness that I like. And it's best if you can use honey that's been purposed locally. It's good for your sinuses. So I'm still letting this simmer now. I'm going to add more honey probably to get it a little sweeter, and it'll be ready to water bath can in about 30 minutes. And for the tomato soup, after you get a nice rolling boil, you're going to let them process for 30 minutes. Before you put your soup in the jars, you want to add 2 tablespoons of lemon juice so that you add some acidity to your jar. Today is day 6. It's August 20th, and this is the last of my tomatoes for the next, I probably have another 4 days, and then there'll be another batch ready, so woohoo! I am so glad I'm at the bottom of the pot. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to make some roasted tomatoes. So I'm going to take those roasted tomatoes and all the wonderful seasonings, and I'm going to make some tomato sauce that I'm going to can, that I'll be able to use for a lot of different recipes. But the main recipe I want to use it for is a homemade manwich sauce. So what I'm going to do is I've washed my tomatoes. I did not seed them. I did not take the guts out. I just took the stem, the core in the middle, cut them in quarters and halves, depending on the size. I'm going to sprinkle them with onions and green pepper just enough to add a little taste. Smells good already. Okay, and then I'm going to take a little bit of garlic powder, sprinkle that all around. You can use fresh garlic if you'd like. Then I'm going to take some oregano leaves, throw those in there, and I'm going to take some sea salt and sprinkle some sea salt in there. And last but not least, some pepper. And I'm going to leave that uncovered. I'm going to put it in a 425-degree oven for about 30 minutes. Then I'm going to check it. I want it to be brown. I want it to be dark. Because when you roast your tomatoes, they caramelize. So they get more of an earthy type of flavor to them. And that's what I'm looking for. So let's check these after 30 minutes. So here are the roasted tomatoes after 30 minutes. And you can see the tops are starting to brown, which means the caramelization process is taking place, but it's still not as dark all over as I would like them to be. So I'm going to stir these up and let them roast for probably another 20 minutes and we'll check them again. There we go. Now we have an all over beautiful brownness to these roasted tomatoes. So I'm going to take them out and put them in my blender, and I'm going to pulsate that until I get a nice sauce, and then we'll see how thick it is. I may have to thicken it up just a little bit. I let this cook down for about a half an hour and got rid of some of the liquid, and now I have a beautiful very nice consistency, robust tomato sauce. And I am going to use pint jars. I'm going to add a tablespoon of lemon juice into the bottom of each one for the acid to make sure that I'm canning safely. And then I will put this sauce in each one of those, and I will water bath those for 30 minutes. And it won't even take you one guess what I'm going to have to work on next. Lord help me. Today for day 7, I wanted to do something cool that wouldn't require me to heat up the canner because it is hot outside today and my air conditioner is working overtime. So I'm going to use up my cucumbers and make some refrigerator freezer cucumbers and onions. So what I do is I slice up my cucumbers as thin as I can get them. I'm going to sprinkle them with peppers and chopped onion and keep layering. And then I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of salt, cover the top with plastic wrap, and let them sit for about 2 hours. And then we'll start adding the vinegar. I ended up with about 5 layers of cucumbers, onions, and peppers. I sprinkled them with 2 tablespoons of salt, and I'm just going to let them sit covered here on the counter for about 2 hours. Over here on the stove, I have 1.5 cups sugar that I have combined with 1/2 cup of white vinegar. And I have it on a low heat, and I'm just going to let it cook until the sugar dissolves and is no longer grainy. And then we're going to combine that with our cucumbers. So I'm going to add half of this mixture to the first half of the batch. And then I'll add the other half to the other half of the batch. And I'm just going to stir it up really well. And then we're going to put them in freezer containers. This is going to go in the freezer. And it has a little sweeter taste than your usual cucumbers and onions, but it's delicious. I'm going to leave about 1/2 inch headspace, and in the freezer they'll go. Now that I have these all packed, I'm going to take my remaining syrup and just add a little bit to every container. And then when you're ready to eat these, you just take them out of the freezer, let them defrost. Let them defrost in the refrigerator, and then they're ready for dinner.